Hello, hello, and more hello. So, we are back with a new video. I haven't done one quite like this before, but I have a business degree, and I think it's high time I use that. It's something that doesn't really come up too often. It has come up a little bit when we've been doing some virtual talk episodes, but not a lot of topics that we cover there really need like a business degree. And even this is something you should know. I think the first time I heard about them was in high school government class. So yeah, we're gonna go into this topic. So what is the topic? Today's topic is, what is a tariff? A lot of people don't seem to understand what they are. So I feel it's important that we go and give it a little talk. I have Wikipedia up. I usually won't be reading directly from Wikipedia. It's just a good thing to have in the background. So if you want, while I talk, you can read a little bit. What is a tariff? A tariff is a tax imposed either by the government or with a body that supersedes the government. This can be a trade union or like a guilds in the old days. Something that has the ability to put a tax on imported or exported goods. It's very unusual to put a tariff on exported goods because that would make your products more expensive outside of your country. That can happen, but usually it doesn't need to happen because the cost of transporting your goods is already going to increase the price anywhere else in the world that you choose to sell them. So, because of that, exported tariffs are very unusual. So, now that we know what a tariff is, let's answer question 2. Why do we use tariffs? So, the most common form of tariff, by far, are protective tariffs. These are tariffs put on very specific goods to increase the cost of a good in your own country, since they're usually, as we just explained, on imported goods. So, here are some classic examples from the US. That's probably the best place to start. We put tariffs on foreign cars. Because of this, a lot of car manufacturers started to build assembly plants, either in the US or in our trade partners who do not get hit with the tariffs, which, by the way, is Canada and Mexico. That's why you'll find almost every foreign car company that sells in the US has a plant either here in Canada or in Mexico. They get all the parts that they need to make their vehicles, and then they ship them here, and they do the final assembly here. And that gets around the tariff on an imported car. This is the way that a tariff is supposed to work. It incentivizes the companies to work around the tariff, and in doing so, increase your actual production in your country. They're usually called one of the few levers that we have to affect the economy, and that's the most classic example. Another good example are Chinese-made solar panels and solar cells. Because of the way China operates, their solar panel companies and solar cell creating companies were able to price their own products far below cost when shipping to the rest of the world. Because of this, the price for their products was significantly below that of our native panel creators and cell creators here in the US and other parts of the world. At this point, I believe in that particular market, something like 80% of the market is all Chinese. So that is a very classic example. So what did we do as a country? We put a tariff on their solar panels. That increases the price here to buy those goods again, And that makes it so our own companies can start to have a equal foot in the market, because the price is going to be roughly the same for the two products. So it's no longer looking at one that is 30% cheaper than the other. What China is doing, by the way, with those is something that is termed dumping. You can read about it down here if you actually want to read Wikipedia. But basically, it's where you produce things that are under the cost of just about anywhere else in the entire world. In China's case, they were specifically making it so it would be cheaper than anywhere else in the world. So, that is what a tariff does. It's used to prop up your own industry so it can compete, usually in an unfair situation with an outside entity. Having said that, why do we not use tariffs more often? Well, there's a simple reason why we usually do targeted tariffs, ones aimed at specific markets. And I'll go back to the cars for a very quick explanation of this. If we were to have a universal tariff on all imported goods, say a 10% tariff, and if we already had a 10% tariff on assembled cars that we were bringing in from outside, just to make these numbers even, this is convenient. So, before you did the universal tariff, you were already having a 10% markup on cars that you assembled elsewhere and brought here. That's very similar to how things already work. Now, if you put a universal tariff on all goods coming into this country, all of those assembly plants that we just talked about earlier, they're now more expensive as each individual good you bring in is taxed with a tariff. Since each part coming in now has a 10% markup, it is far cheaper to build a car elsewhere in the world, ship it here, and only have to eat the tariff once. This is a classic example, again, of why you don't have universal tariffs. You have now just negated the benefit that you had with a targeted tariff. It's no longer protecting just a very specific market. It is now aimed across the board. And as we already explained, the cost of a good sold is what changes with a tariff. You're not taxing China when you put a tax on imported solar panels from China. That cost is what goes down on the product here. China doesn't pay that. China already sold the good. The one that pays it is whoever brings it into the country and then goes to sell it. Usually, if that's different from the entity that brings it over, it is considered sold to someone here when you actually do the transit. So that should be a fairly simple concept. So if you were, say, FedEx, and you were carrying something over that has a tariff on it from, Germany to the US, as an easy example off the top of my head, FedEx doesn't pay the tariff. Who pays the tariff is whoever gets it on the other end. In the same way, those tariffs, or the cost of them, are passed on to whoever ends up with the product, since almost no business wants to make no money. In fact, I don't know any businesses that don't want to make money. They would not be a business for very long if they did. So, there's one last aspect to tariffs that we need to look at least here in the US. If you're not a US citizen, you can probably basically skip this part. So, who can actually impose a tariff in the US? Well, this right here basically explains the answer. And I'm not going to read the particular Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act clauses to you, but let's just say a Trade Agreement Act of 1934 authorized the president to negotiate bilateral reciprocal trade agreements and proclaim changes to the U.S. tariff rates up to 50% of existing rates without further congressional action. So a president doesn't necessarily need Congress to imply almost any tariff on any good. And who says this, you might wonder? I mean, it's not Google. Google's not saying that. No, that would be the Congressional Research Service. And because it's such a recent thing for people to be interested in, they did this as part of the July 31st publication of this year. It is one of the few levers that the president can actually do without invoking Congress. Now, I'm not 100% sold on the fact that you can actually universally tax all products just from the president, but that would have to be argued probably in the Supreme Court, whether they have unilateral ability to do universal tariffs. Because I don't think the language in the original law, and I actually did read it, but I won't pain you guys with reading it to you. And it seems to be fairly broad worded. It's not specific enough because it doesn't ever mention universal tariffs. But presumably, the president has the ability to do it without any act of Congress. A very unusual situation. So, I think we've pretty much covered what you need to know about tariffs. I won't make any decisions for you about what to do with this information, but I feel this is important information for you to have, because as I've stated, tariffs are not taxes on other countries, or specifically anything that goes back to those countries. They are taxes that apply to whoever here is the one that buys them. And specifically for the US, this is important because we make very little here in the US anymore. In the short term, putting a universal tariff on all goods coming from outside of our country would be a disaster, the likes you cannot imagine. I'll just let you think that over for a little bit. Until our own internal American production can actually match our demand here in the US for goods and services, a universal tax on foreign goods is going to demolish our actual prices that we pay. And with that, I will end this. So, I hope you enjoyed this little conversation. If you have, put a comment in, subscribe, maybe give me a like, and I'll see you later. Bye.